Good afternoon to the Black Dispatch audience. We are so excited this glorious afternoon to have one of the preeminent legislators in Illinois with us today, Senator Kimberly Lightford. I'm here with my distinguished colleague, Hubert Morgan, to engage the senator around the enormous work that she has historically done on behalf of the 4th District. And Senator, how are you today?
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Actually, I'm doing rather well. I spent some time having my own tutorial on how to get on. How to get, this technology and I haven't been the best of friends, but it's becoming our new way of communicating, so I better get with it.
Well, let me just say, Senator, we appreciate all the effort that you put in it, and you're my kind of woman for that.
Well, thank you.
So
I didn't give up. I hung in there.
That's what I'm saying.
You did.
You're persistent. So you love it. That's your legislative. That's part of your legislative kind of technique, right?
Amen. It really is persistency when you recognize ills that affect the people that you are there to serve. I have been pretty persistent in trying to tackle that. You know, earlier on, it garnered me the angry black woman, tag, if you will. But I've come to now appreciate that because it meant that I was very persistent. And I am persistent on ensuring that the black community has everything that's owed to us and everything that we rightfully deserve. You know, we should have direct access. And I find that over the years, it preceded me, of course, but I just found that over the years that the system itself is racist in nature and it doesn't provide the supports that our community needs.
Well, that really does bridge us into the conversation that my co-host Hubert and I would like to have with you, Senator, about the enormous work that you've taken a lead in and which you've ignited around the 4 pillars that the Black Caucus has kind of initiated. And we wanted to really talk with you a little bit about, what ignited that vision and kind of promoting those pillars. And down, a little further down the road, we want to talk about how you think it's going. But let's start with what ignited you to kind of lead that initiative and kind of bring it to fruition and develop its components.
Well, let me say that it's been 2 decades of me serving in the legislature and being a part of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus. You know, when I arrived there as the youngest senator ever elected in the state, there was true leadership in the Black Caucus, and I just find that me being a part of their efforts helped shape the way I thought we ought to approach this. I've witnessed them as a young member try to maneuver in situations. I witnessed them as the chairman of the Senate Black Caucus for my first 8 years and trying to figure it all out. And then when this actually shaped out, I was in my 5th year of serving as the chairman of the Joint Black Caucus. And what I do know about all Black Caucus members is that we carry a load. We come to the legislature knowing that there has to be changes in order for us to rid Illinois of systemic racism, not knowing directly to call it that, but we know and witness generational poverty. And we know what that looks like and what that feels like. And we come with this weight on our shoulders to find out that there's a process in place that impedes your growth, that doesn't allow you to deliver what you know it is your community needs. And after you continue to go at it and go at it and go at it, you begin to be discouraged. And it's like it's not that we're not doing the work, and it's not that we're not fighting the battles. It's we're up against systemic racism that has been embedded in state government, that has been there ever since history has been in place, ever since the state of Illinois in the 1800s. I mean, there has been racism embedded in the policies and the procedures. And so when we came to this place of the George Floyd incident, we had already developed a wonderful partnership with all black legislators from the federal, state, city, and county level. And we call ourselves the Joint Caucus, and Larry Rogers is our chairman. And we've been meeting for some years and developing out how to bridge our work efforts from the city, state, county, federal level, so that we can know what each one is sending over and sitting down, and how to galvanize around ensuring that our people actually feel what it is that we're doing, that they're actually able to benefit from what we're doing. And when the George Floyd incident actually happened, we began to do protests all around the city and in the suburban areas. And at that moment, you know, I am spiritually led, and God gave me a vision. And the vision was basically that we had to do more, that we had this awesome opportunity right now. The world is watching. You're in a pandemic that none of you have ever witnessed. And we were literally on a shutdown. And everyone, all colors and creeds all over, were chanting that Black Lives Matter. And the Black Lives Matter movement didn't just start with George Floyd, but people began to embrace the wrongs who were not black people, and began to say, you're right, there is an injustice, and black lives do matter. So we'll walk with you and march with you and in a parade. And so I thought, well, can you go further than a march? Can you go further than a parade? Can I approach the legislature and say to my colleagues, we need you to do something different that you've not done before? We generally have expungement legislation that take years to get past the legislature. You know, whenever we have initiatives that we know are beneficial to our community, we get pushback. We you know, and because there is a process that it takes 30 votes in the Senate and 60 votes in the House, and we don't have that number as just black legislators or even black and brown legislators, we still fall short, that we need some of our white colleagues to support our initiatives. So I felt that it was time to put them to the test and see if black lives really did matter, or were they going to continue walking around in parades chanting that black lives matter and enough is enough and all these things. And so as the chairman of the Black Caucus, I approached the Black Caucus Foundation and I asked them if they could help me with this vision. And I knew that it was massive in nature. I wasn't exactly sure how to, but I knew that it had to happen. And I said, first, let's just have a retreat. A couple days, we worked 9 to 5 for a couple days straight, bringing in researchers, bringing in advocacy groups, bringing in those stakeholders who are engaged with particular practices. You know, many people think as a legislature, you're supposed to know it all. There's no way that I know every single subject and that I can give you a conversation from the environment to education to transportation to child care, to crime. I just don't know it all. I know what I'm focused in, and that's education and youth development, and I could tell you anything you want to know about that for the last 23 years. But I don't know that I could give you all of the research and data and be this big, know-it-all on all these subjects. But I knew enough to say I need to get the help from the professionals. So what we did in our retreat, the Black Caucus as a whole, we all pushed up our sleeves and sat down together in a Zoom setting for 2 days, 8-9 hour days, and said, hey, how is the black community affected and we just threw it out. It's kind of like a dartboard. If you could just throw out all your anger at why don't we have? Why are our children constantly born in poverty? And why can't we break this vicious cycle? So we started throwing out ideas, and they all kept coming into this space of criminal justice reform was needed, violence prevention was needed, a police accountability was needed. We ended up looking at, oh gosh, all of this would fit under education and workforce development. Then we looked at, oh my God, economics. There's no access. So there's no economic access. There's no opportunity. The banking system shuts us down. They give us payday loan stores for us to have to shop at with these alarming percentages and all of these things. We're shut out of finances, right? We're shut out of good paying jobs. We don't receive a quality education. We live in food deserts. Our health care is not up to par because we don't eat healthy from young ages, and that goes and goes and goes till you have high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, all these things because you don't have access to fresh produce and fresh meats and things of that nature. And so when I tell you guys we probably had 200 or 300 items that we were just throwing out were barriers. What are the barriers to the growth of the Black community? And as we threw all those barriers out, we began to shape them, and then we took that information to those researchers and said, hey, this is what we've recognized as challenges. This is what we found that was on the books. We actually had laws that were passed by previous Black Caucus members through the years that was never implemented. Never implemented by previous administrations. So we did a deep dive. Let's pull up laws that we know passed both chambers, signed by the governor. We never felt an impact. Let's look to those things. Let's also look more currently to building our criminal justice reform. We know that we just passed a big act in 2015, and we require body cams then. So now, why is the law being ignored? So we have to put sanctions in place. We have to identify, for example, in the economic interest space, we created a whole new commission because there's no oversight. If this same prime company keeps coming back, being reissued revenue from state government, but they don't have any minority goals that they've met, why are we constantly re-upping them and renewing their contract? Because they're signing a waiver saying we couldn't find a Black company. And that's unreal in the state of Illinois that you cannot find a Black company. Now, if that Black company doesn't have the total capacity that is required, then that's when relationships amongst Black companies have to come together and say, hey, we need to pull it together so we can apply for this big, RFP together because, you're a fraction of what they're asking for. I'm a fraction of what they're asking for. But together we can partner on this and get this big deal. But they don't even give us the opportunity to present ourselves in that way. It's easier for them to grab this waiver and just say we couldn't find any minority companies, and then they don't meet their goals, but then they're constantly renewed the revenue. And so we saw that as a huge, huge challenge when you look at a $41.5 billion budget and less than 2%, 3% is going to the Black community. That is just pure racism. And so I knew that we had an awesome opportunity to hold our colleagues accountable. And instead of just passing a bill here and passing a bill there, I remember this omnibus bill that I learned about actually when I was in graduate school. And I was in graduate school in the early 90s at the University of Illinois. It was actually Sangamon State University at the time, and then University of Illinois purchased them out. But one of my teachers there for public administration was a stickler on what was happening at the state capitol. And so our whole semester was following legislation and what was happening at the state capitol. And there was this big omnibus bill. And I remember him describing how, oh, it starts out with this one subject matter and then it just blows up like a big Christmas tree. And so I just remember telling the caucus, we're going to have a big Christmas tree. It's time for us to try to create an omnibus bill, put as much in it as we can that we know will have a generational effect, and organize it in a pillar system. So this had to be about the end of the second day of the retreat, after talking to researchers, and then we began to, we had already had subcommittees in the Black Caucus set up working on different challenges, so it was real easy to identify co-chairs to lead these pillars. And so Senator Sims and Representative Slaughter became the co-chairs of our first pillar, which addressed criminal justice reform, and neither one of them was new in this space. Senator Sims was the House sponsor at that time of the 2015 Act, and our Attorney General, Kwame Raoul, was the Senate sponsor. So pretty much they were still building from 2015. So if there was no other time to strike, the time was now. And then education and workforce development, I love it. It's my passion. And Representative Carol Ammons is the representative over Champaign-Urbana, the first Black down in the southern part of the state. And she became my co-chair and has a strong passion for higher education and workforce development. And on the third pillar, which is our joint caucus chair, Representative Sonia Harper. She's so strong in agriculture and in Black farming and all of the things around economic development. And a lot of our colleagues had different pieces of legislation that they were working on to improve in that space. And Senator Collins, is a strong advocate for fairness in lending practices, and so she's been the chairman of financial institutions for so very long, and has been fighting these big, fighting the big banking industries, and it's very difficult to win against these groups. And they have the revenue to hire every lobbyist in the building, and they just chip off members, and no matter if it's good and is needed for the Black community, there's always an excuse. And then that fourth and final pillar is what the pandemic brought us to, healthcare and human services. And why is it that more Black people were impacted by the pandemic than any other race? And so it was all those things that lined up with social detriments of health. And when you look at the social detriments of health and you look at the Black Caucus pillars, we are spot on in recognizing what the challenges have been, how we can address them legislatively, and put these things in state law and make sure the follow-through is there so that it's implemented. That's what's key. You can work your butt off and come up with and pass anything you want, but if the administration is not implementing and overseeing and being fair and providing the equity through an equity lens, then it just doesn't happen. So I know that's a long answer to how we got started, but I really want your listeners and everyone to know that it was a team effort of the Black Caucus. We had no idea that a pandemic would hit and that this opportunity would come forth, but what I knew as the chairman of the caucus is that we were going to seize the moment, that we were going to rise to the occasion, that we were going to continue to work as a team, and that we were going to provide relief for our communities. And I truly believe that as these pillars are being enacted and our Black community begin to actually dive in and see everything that's available for them, that we will begin to turn this whole generational poverty around. We'll be able to decrease the percentages of Black people born into poverty and begin to move us from that space to being My goal is to be, at least middle class citizens. If like, who wants to just, there was a percentage that I learned that blew my mind. It says that 48% of black people born in this country, it was one from a national trend, 48% of blacks are born into poverty. That's almost half of black people born in this country are just by birth born into poverty. What blew me away was that 46% live their full life in poverty, which means only 2% of blacks are able to escape poverty. Why is that? That's a systemic challenge. If then your Caucasian friends are born into wealth and they don't know poverty, they have good schools, they get degreed, and even those who don't get degreed, they're giving apprenticeships and they're given careers and they're given things that we have no access to. And some are gifted where if they want to be an entrepreneur and start a business, they don't even have to go to a bank for a loan. Someone in the family gives them, or it's in the will, or they can go to the bank. They don't have to go to a payday loan store. It's just been that we've been living in this vicious, racist system, and it's time to dismantle it. And it's time to call people out if they're still upholding white supremacy. It's time to let them know that not only do we recognize it, we're not tolerating it. It has to change.
So, Senator Lightford, Kirk and I are both urban planners, and I think that how we think and how we work and how our work contributes to our practice, we also think about the systems that you just mentioned. So it's very interesting that the pillars came down as they did, because in our work where this podcast is concerned, and how we would like our listeners who also think about the system, and they ask so many times when we talk to them in terms of the challenges that they face, well, the system isn't working for us, right? And you have categorized that system in these pillars. We also think about the systems and the systems that are broken for the very listeners that are going to be listening to our show. So I'm going to ask you, in terms of the people that you represent, the constituents, for the listeners, can you describe the geographic area that you represent and the type of people that you serve?
Sure. I represent the 4th Senate District, which is parts of the Austin community on the west side of Chicago. And
West Side?
West Side.
They say West Side the best, sorry.
West Side, honey. West Side. Look, you starting stuff, Hubert. I represent the West Side and Proviso Township. There's about 14 communities in Proviso that I either have the fullness of the community or a portion. My hometown is Maywood. My family moved from, my parents were born and raised on the West Side, and they moved their family to Maywood in 1972. So I was 4 years old when my family moved to Maywood. So I'm more of a Maywoodian, but all of my family, grandparents, everybody is on the West Side. It's where I grew up every summer, every holiday, And so anyway, that is my district, and the people in my district is that gives me this drive, because it's very diverse. It's a very diverse district. I can be in one of the most wealthiest top 10 communities in the state to one of the top 10 most poverty-stricken communities within a less than 10-minute drive. but I don't change. My conversation doesn't change. And I know that I'm working for the least of these. Now, I identify with my communities that don't have as greater needs as other communities, but my grandmother always talked about being a giver, but she also always talked about, you can't treat all your children the same because they have different needs. And I learned that one size didn't fit all as a young girl. And my approach is the same. I recognize you as a community, and I'm willing to legislate and work for you. But these communities over here that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, that are communities that are food deserts, communities that lack resources, just have greater needs. I learned that I've spent more of my time, if you will, or most of my time trying to get to the root of that. Now, I do believe that all children deserve a quality education. So in my passion, it's been very easy for me to continue to work in that space. I never work to pull people down. If you're doing well, we want to keep your kids elevated. But I want you to also acknowledge that every little black boy and every little black girl do not have behavioral challenges or have ADHD because you didn't test them to see if they were gifted. We can't assume that we don't have gifted children that should be a part of gifted education opposed to special education. And so that's where I've taken a deep dive over the years to say, hey, universal preschool is important. That was the program that I led in 2006 to create the universal preschool for all for 3 and 4-year-olds, because we've got to stop having our kids just be at the babysitter's house. There has to be a curriculum for our children as young as 3 and 4-year-olds so that they're ready for kindergarten. Because once they arrive in kindergarten, they're not prepared. They take that first standardized test in 3rd grade, they are underachieving. And it's very difficult for them to ever catch up. And they're just passing our kids through to a place when they get to high school, either they're dropping out or they push them through high school, but they can't pass a basic exam for city colleges or a basic exam for a math test to be an apprentice, or they can't, there's a portion that's always missing. Then we find our 18 and 24-year-olds still trying to find their place. I'm not college bound, or either I can't afford it, or I'm first generational and I need some additional supports, and they're not readily available for them. So that's been a big push for me in my district when I look at the diversity and I acknowledge the differences and the needs. And some pull on you a little bit more than others, but I think that's just life, and that's what public service is all about, addressing the greatest needs.
So, Kirk, let me just make a suggestion in terms of the time that we have. And let me, Senator Lightford, just appreciate a staff member of yours who has been great at facilitating our coming together. So, Claire, I'm going to give her a shout out. Yeah. With the time that we have left, Kirk, let me just ask, Senator, if you could tee up the fact that we're going to invite you to another show and just answer the question, what the person who is walking into MacArthur's to get some greens and some fried chicken, why are you the one who is advocating on their behalf in terms of the education pillar? Do you want to add something to that, Kirk? Because that's going to be the answer that is going to tee up when she comes on next.
No, I think that's a good positioning for the senator, and I know she got more than we got time for to say right now. So I do appreciate the opportunity to recapture her, and in between we can make sure that her mama's preparing that peach cobbler for us.
So, Senator, you only have about 3 or 4 minutes because we have a hard stop that you can get to your next meeting.
Okay, so when you speak of MacArthur's, MacArthur's is a pillar of economic development in our community and has been for a very long time. I actually have known the family for prior to becoming a senator. And those goes back to the Mississippi roots, right? So from Lexington, and my friends I grew up with, parents, they were all from the same place, right? So we learned earlier on that we were all cousins. So I've been aware.
Does that make you my cousin too?
I believe we're family.
Okay, Senator, I've known you longer. Don't leave me out now.
Oh, I know, Harris. We're definitely family. But let me tell you, before MacArthur moved into the space that he's in now, or before he even opened up that store, he had a record store. When we were little, we go listen to music,
wow.
and when all of the big time people would come in and they would be on the south side, and when they came to the west side, they went to MacArthur Records, and so that was around before the collard greens and the mac and cheese and all of that. But when he brought that on, we were like grateful for it, right? I like communicating with people one-on-one and just talking to them in the community. So I would love it if they would allow me to sit down with them and eat some greens too. And I would want to just ask them flat out, like, how do they feel about government? There's a huge distrust from the Black community in government, and that is rightfully so. And when they meet Black legislators, why are we good people when we're running? But the minute we become the legislator, we're no longer a good person. And I think there's this miseducation, lack of knowledge, lack of understanding of what we're up against as Black legislators when we're fighting for them. I've not spent a day of my tenure in the legislature not fighting for the Black community, not fighting for the customers at MacArthur, not fighting for my cousins. I've not ever not done it. So when I talk to people and they're rude, or either they say things that are inappropriate, it becomes difficult to explain a process in a setting where you're passerby. But when you host as a legislator town hall meetings, when you send out press releases, when you have community events, and they don't show up, then they're showing this interest, and they say, well, what are you doing? We only see you when it's time to vote. And I had to ask one lady one day, where were you supposed to see me at? So let me share with you what my calendar has been for the last month, and then you tell me where you've been for the last month, and let's see why we missed each other. And she looked at me and said, I've been working to church. I said, so I don't work with you, and I don't fellowship at your church. So for you to say you haven't seen me, you haven't been to none of these community events that I've been to. You've not been to none of the community events that I've hosted. You've not attended any town hall meetings. Where am I supposed to see you? I'd like to fellowship at my own church. I don't care to hop around on Sundays, praise the Lord. So where am I supposed to see you? And so that is a part of it. And I invited her to that next event that was on my schedule. And it was actually for a Martin Luther King event. And she showed up at the event. She bought a ticket and she showed up. And she walked up to me and we smiled and had the biggest hug. And she told me that if she don't see me no other time, that she was going to see me at that event every year, because she really enjoyed herself and she really enjoyed being a part of the community. And she realized that she was more of a complainer instead of a participant in the process. And so I think if I could talk to the community, especially those of us who feel neglected, who feel misused, who feel that we've received a lack of, I would like to communicate with them that, I feel the same. My family feels the same. And I work on your behalf very diligently. And share with me what your concerns are, and let me see how I can address them. I believe that would be my conversation.
And that's a great segue into the deeper discussion that we'd like to have with you in the future about education, because it's clear, Senator, that it's almost has to be a personal touch in some ways for people to connect. Mm-hmm. And making those personal touches are sometimes challenging in this busy, crazy world, not only on your side, right, but also on the side of the people that you need and want to connect to. So we want to thank you.
We would love to help facilitate this, because we've had this discussion, Senator, and I think that one of the reasons why Kirk and I started this is a discussion that we had. So one, I appreciate that. And, I'd just like the audience to know that any way that we can facilitate the discussion between our leaders and the people who depend on sending you through voting to the positions that you hold, that you can advocate on their behalf. So
absolutely.
And we can't say more.
Now, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you all for hearing me out when I had that talk with you a couple years ago, saying, "Hey, help us get the message to our community." We need leadership in the community to help convey the message. And I love the community non-for-profit organizations that have been boots on the ground, working hard in the communities for years. But I don't know that when people get help from them that they understand that help came from the Black Caucus. If there wasn't support in Springfield for those entities, they wouldn't exist in the community. But I think there's a disconnect even there. When once that entity get what their needs are, they won't say, "Well, I got this grant because of the Black Caucus," or "This youth employment program is paying you because the Black Caucus put X amount of money in the budget for youth programs," or because the Black Caucus put X amount of money for violence prevention, or the Black Caucus put money for after-school programs. No one else has done that in my 23 years but the Black Caucus, and I can only speak to what I know. Now, if all of us collectively can't speak and support each other, but or if we can't continue to pass the torch and say, "Hey, my time is up. It's time for me to mentor this young person." That young lady you had on your show that day, was very inspiring to me. She needs mentorship. She's going to be amazing. But if we don't continue to just take our own, but we want to hold it individually and say, I did this, that, and another, then other people's going to overlook us, which is what they've been doing. And then our message never comes across because they don't want to deliver it. And this is an example. These pillars was the biggest pieces of legislation that have come out of Springfield probably in its existence. And it was hush hush. Don't let the Black folks know what the Black folks did for them. And then all this character assassination started on me. Kill the leadership. Don't let them lead. It's the Willie Lynch letter. And I say it all the time. Go back and read the Willie Lynch letter. We are living in that, and it works because crabs in a barrel is real within our communities, and we have to cut that out. We have to cut that out.
Well, Senator, you said more than enough to say prayers over, as my grandmama says. So I would just thank you for being with us this afternoon and sharing your insights. And you can't escape us. This is like the mafia. Once you in, you never get out.
Yeah. Well, I've been connected, Dr. Harris. I've been connected to you for a long time. We've pushed some really good legislation.
We have
the legislature to help. With child support and to to help our second chance families. So this isn't nothing new. It's just we've got to take our message to the street.
There it is. I love it. Yeah. There's more work to be done, and we know you on it.
I'm for it.
And I don't want Claire coming back and saying that we spent too much time with you. So, Senator, it has been an absolute pleasure. It was a pleasure when I met you the last time and the time before that. So it's not only Kirk who has had that pleasure.
I know we just go back to Fatherhood's Rights days when we created the Fatherhood's Rights Commission, but then one of the attorneys took it and started moving it around, making money off of it like he did it, right? But it wasn't him.
That's a whole nother thing.
That's a whole nother thing where if we don't speak up, they take it and they own it and say they did it, you know. And that's real too. That's real too. So I'm looking forward to talking to you all a little bit more, because I think this has been my most exciting conversation in all week. So thank you for it.
We thank you for having it. And with that, and your commitment to come back, we're going to end the show and tell the audience that to keep track of Senator Lightford, because she's a woman on the move.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
West Side.